Live.
Great. Good morning. Happy Friday. We are back to our work. The House Transportation Committee is Friday, it is March 3rd. Meeting before the floor to finish walking through draft 3.1 and a new chart. So this is the draft of our committee bill. So welcome back, Anthea. Thank you for joining us early.
Thank you for having me. For the record, Anthea Dexter Cooper from the Office of Legislative Counsel. I'm going to put the bill draft 3.1 back up on the screen. This is the one dated March 1st. This was what you were walking through yesterday. There was no new draft. You were waiting until you got through the end of this walkthrough and today to get your go home for break draft. You left off with Electrify Your Fleet program on page 21. To refresh the committee's memory, the agency has proposed codifying 3 of the 4 existing vehicle incentive programs, being the incentive program for new PEVs, Replace Your Ride, and Mileage Smart. Those are the ones we talked about yesterday. They did not propose codifying what has been in session law, which has been very limited language on the iterations of e-bike incentives, but they have proposed through section 2905, what you have up on your screen, to codify and create the Electrify Your Fleet program. So this is a new program. This is not something where you can compare to session law to see how things have changed. This is brand new. The language that you're going to see in 2905 is going to be very similar to the language that you saw in 290, 3, and 4 for those other incentive programs, the ones that exist and are proposed for codification. So in subsection A, this is where you get your creation and administration language, creating the program. It's administered by the Agency of Transportation. No required consulting entities here. As you'll remember from your discussion yesterday, there were originally required consulting entities as the other programs were being developed. Those programs now exist and are being codified or proposed for codification in a relatively similar to their existing structure. This is a new program, so maybe this is an instance where you would want to have a requirement to consult here. It could be that you don't want to muck up the green books with that, and maybe an approach, if you do want to require some consultation, is to put that in session law. So something to consider. I know that was something the committee was talking about yesterday in terms of whether or not it was a good thing that required consultation had been taken out for the other programs. Same language in subdivision 2 that you've seen in all of the other ones. Subject to straight procurement requirements, the agency may retain 1 or more contractors to assist with marketing, program development, and administration of the program. You want me to pause there or go to subsection B?
Well, it sounds like there was a question about a policy decision there, so it might be worth pausing.
I will pause.
So just about that this is a new program. And when we created these other programs, there was language in session law to consider for them to work with a consultant. And here it's just agency transportation. So I just want to open that up to comments.
Can I say one more thing?
Please, yeah.
Another sort of approach is this is a new program. You don't know if it's going to be an ongoing program. It could be that the conversation the committee has is you like the program, we want to move forward with it, but we don't want to put it in the green book. So that's another sort of topic that has come up consistently in this committee when you've talked about the whole codification approach.
Right. I see Representative Burke.
Well, I was going to say that, hearing that, it was just like, well, we haven't even started this program yet. And why would we codify it without even knowing whether it's going to be successful and whether it's going to continue? And we know that Mileage Smart and the new PEV program have been going on. Now, Replace Your Ride has not actually gotten started, but it has been in the legislation. It's been being developed. So I don't know. I would just question codifying that.
Okay. Others? That is the question that we've had similar discussions around other Yeah, we're to McCoy.
Are we codifying replace your ride? And
Well,
it isn't
so
even up and
the-
running yet,
It is up and running.
but it's not like the finally after, I mean, we're codifying it and it's just getting up and running.
I think it's been up and running since the fall. I think there just hasn't been a lot of uptake for the program and they want to make some changes. I mean, based on your discussions yesterday, I have check marks next to those sections saying, don't make changes to them for this next draft. But, you have not, it hasn't been codified yet, so you guys can always change the direction of the bill. But it seemed like there was committee interest. The vibe that I was getting was, for the time being, they should stay in the to be codified section of the bill.
Other comments?
Sure.
Representative Shaw?
So I'm fine with codifying the incentive programs in 2902 and just before that, I'm fine with that. I'm still haven't decided if I'm fine with codifying Mileage Smart and Replace Your Ride. But I'm fine with codifying the incentive programs, language itself. So for a lot of different reasons, but I'm just not sure that I want to put that in the green books yet. And if we do that, I wouldn't codify the fleet program either at the same time. And I had that conversation with Representative Burke to possibly talk about e-bikes and maybe putting a little money into that program with some deliverables program could give us, so we can make a decision whether or not we're getting the best bang for our buck in that program. So maybe all 4 of those programs could be still remain sessional. Just throwing that out there. I don't want to make a decision today. Something that you want over the week. Homework.
So what, I'm hearing that there's a flag in this, that we should flag this, whether the decision about, it sounds like I'm hearing that people have some questions about whether we should do that. Representative Burke?
And this is just another thing to think about if we're talking about Mileage Smart, is that, and I think I said this the other day, gave the number of cars that Mileage Smart has incentivized over the course of its existence, and that's 478 cars.
Yeah, and I'll just say for myself,
Yeah.
I think Mileage Smart and Replace Your Ride have been around longer. For me, it's in a different category than this new proposal. Like that program, while it's been slow for the uptick, it's set up. It's set up, it's ready to go. This is electrify your people. Maybe we should move through to actually get into some of the details and maybe come back to this question about codification, but so we do that.
It's similar to what Representative Shaw yesterday on the outreach and marketing on this electrify your fleet to remove the Drive Electric Vermont.
I will
as we
remove it
did
if
in the
you-
other programs.
If you decide to
If we
keep the
decide to
program,
keep it.
I will remove that.
Yes.
That was just a flag. Yeah, okay. So maybe what would help us as a committee is to get into more of what the program is in this language, and then we can revisit this question about whether it gets codified or not. How does that sound? All right.
Okay.
So if you don't codify it, basically you're just striking out 2905 and everything stays the same.
So what I would do is if you decided not to codify this program, I would have it as session law, and then I would include, so like what's currently section 2905 under whatever section of the bill we were talking about. I would then pull it out, have it be session law with a new section number in the T-bill, and I would add a subsection at the end that said the reporting requirements of section, what would then become 2905, because you're going to talk about the reporting requirements in section 2906, shall apply for the Electrify Your Fleet program, so that that's still captured in the reporting that comes in, so you'll have like some data about the program. And then that would really be the only change.
Okay. Yeah. Just here, so it, what it would look like. So it's more than just striking out 2905.
Yeah, but I mean, so you've got your decision points of like, do we codify the program? You also have your decision point of like, do we want to do the Electrify Your Fleet program?
So that's why let's get into that, and then there's the money for we
Yeah,
want to put money into it, so or take away money from another program to do this. So
Okay, so program structure, the Electrify Your Fleet program shall structure purchase and lease incentive payments to replace internal combustion engine vehicles cycled out of a motor vehicle fleet and reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of persons operating a motor vehicle fleet in Vermont. Specifically, it needs to provide incentives to Vermont municipalities and business entities registered in Vermont that maintain a fleet of motor vehicles that are registered in Vermont, with no single applicant being eligible for more than 20 incentives over the existence of the program. The incentives would be $2,500. It's not an up to, it's just a flat $2,500 for battery electric vehicles, no plug-in hybrid electric vehicles here. So it's all electric. It would be a base MSRP as determined by the Agency of Transportation and benchmarked to approximately $60,000 or less in this current model year. You could put in your same not to exceed language. I will say that it was intentional on the part of the Agency of Transportation, and I think it's probably obvious that it was intentional because there is a $10,000 higher base MSRP cap for this model year there, and that's to address the fact that maybe what's appropriate for a fleet vehicle is not the same as a personal vehicle. Incentives could also be used for electric bicycles and electric cargo bicycles. Those would have a base MSRP of $6,000 or less in the current model year. And then electric motorcycles linked to a base MSRP of $30,000 or less in the current model year. And then electric snowmobiles, current model year benchmark of $20,000 or less for the model year. And then the final requirement is that there would need to be a showing that the incentive will be used to electrify the applicant's motor vehicle fleet. So you've got the lead-in language to the purpose of the program is to replace internal combustion engine vehicles, and then there needs to be the showing that it needs to be electrifying the applicant's fleet. So that's the structure of the program. It is less regimented than Replace Your Ride in that there doesn't need to be the replacing of a vehicle, but there are still the requirements that there be the showing that it's going to electrify a fleet and replace internal combustion engine vehicles. And that will be left to the agency in creating and administering the program to figure out how that's shown. And I'm assuming that would be done through program guidelines, just like the other programs have been structured.
So,
Representative Shaw?
Representative Couch, beat me.
Oh, sorry. He has an unfair advantage, so Representative Couch.
Has sense that, thank you. A couple of questions. One is, it does say the purpose is to electrify your fleet. Just to clarify, it doesn't mean everything you have has to be switched, just so it's just a term they're using. And then this doesn't stop somebody from adding to their fleet. So there's no expectation that you have to take something out of your fleet and add an electric vehicle or whatever.
So
Are you purchasing under this program?
I would say that second question is fuzzier. So the Electrify Your Fleet program shall structure purchase and lease incentive payments to replace internal combustion engine vehicles cycled out of a motor vehicle fleet. I don't think it requires them to be cycled out now, but I think the expectation in the language there is that it's somehow yielding fewer internal combustion engine vehicles in the fleet, but the details are not there. So I think that would be a question for the agency as to how they would interpret that language. And it could be that that's a question that the agency can't fully answer yet until they develop the program guidelines.
Okay, thank you.
No,
Okay.
but I think he is.
Okay, so I noticed we have electric snowmobiles, I'm assuming that's for ski areas in the wintertime. But we don't, I don't even know, are there electric ATVs? Because in the summertime, I don't know if utilities use ATVs to look at their lines or utility
I can
lines.
tell you that they do because there are specific exemptions in the ATV usage for utility companies. I cannot answer your question about whether or not there are existing electric
Okay,
ATVs.
so
Do not know.
I don't know who researches that, but if we're gonna do it for snowmobiles and we want people to electrify their fleet, if there's if utilities are using it, I think we should add them in too. I don't know.
Or we could not, so, you know, or there's a question about whether snowmobiles should be
Should be in there as well,
included.
and bicycles.
Bikes.
Yeah, what do they use with bikes? I don't know. Do they use bikes in police department? I don't know. I don't think they use that in my neck of the woods.
Burlington,
Do they?
Burlington, they
Yeah,
used to
a
at least.
lot, that's been one of the big, like,
Would be a Burlington.
community work,
Yeah, must be.
you know, to work
Yeah,
more.
sure, sure.
They use bicycles and, yeah, we don't have any bicycles.
You guys were talking, you missed Representative Pucker's comments.
What? Oh, it must be a Burlington thing?
Yeah.
Oh, must be
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I'm confirming you are right.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, no judgment. I was just making a factual statement.
Right.
We use snowmobiles.
So same here.
So, just to sort of add, what else could, I mean, you know, towns and businesses have, you know, they mow grass and do that, so. you know,
Well, this is for
potentially-
20, oh, it doesn't matter how big the fleet
So
is.
potentially, you know, you might use it to mow
As a matter of fact,
fields. I don't know, I'm just putting, you know, there's a lot of things that could be added maybe.
Yeah, that's-
Bad about it.
You raise a really good point, because I'm just remembering, I learned from somewhere, maybe a select board thing, that the emissions from lawnmowers are really significant.
Yeah.
So that's a really great idea, this whole category of things.
We-
Yes, Representative Pike. and then-
So, which brings me to, what is a fleet? Like, is it more than 5, less than 50?
You know,
Have it in there?
Patrick, and also Patrick Murphy
In this,
hopped on. I want to give Anthea the opportunity to answer your question, but Patrick might be able to also, I mean, it's what the considerations were. I think this is in Patrick's wheelhouse, and I see that you're here on Zoom, Patrick. I see. Yeah, I don't think we can hear you yet, Patrick. Oh, here we go. Great.
I'll leave this right here. It's 5.
Good morning,
Good
Madam
morning.
Chair, and members of the committee. Patrick Murphy, Vermont Agency of Transportation. There's, I would say that there's quite a few considerations to be worked out in the design of the program. But the thinking is that, you know, in terms of ease of administration, going further down into all kinds of electrical equipment or possible equipment to be electrified, that might become unwieldy, and it might be hard to sort of estimate what the potential greenhouse gas emissions reductions are from those things. You know, when you're talking about larger vehicles, traditionally cars, but then also snowmobiles and other things. I think it's easier to see how an investment of public funds can produce the returns that we'd want to see there. But it's more difficult when you're looking at a variety of pieces of equipment that we then have to establish what are the emissions from that. And you know, an electric mower, for example, would have to come up with what are the emissions. It's just much more difficult because you don't have an odometer necessarily on a mower to understand what has been the historical emissions from that and what we are genuinely replacing. So I think you know, we don't want to make this an overly complex program, but we did want to respect the fact that there are elements within the Replace Your Ride program that we could take and apply to fleet incentives. So that was the thinking behind it.
The fleet. And Patrick, I don't see what is a fleet? More than 2, more than 5?
We haven't defined a fleet because I think we've wanted to leave some room in there for hearing back from folks what is actually needed. We don't in Vermont have a large number of large fleets. The state of Vermont is also different in that, you know, for example, the state of Massachusetts will if you're an independent contractor, you have to register your vehicle with a commercial plate. That is not the case here in the state of Vermont. So we wouldn't want to sort of rule out some of those commercial type of applications. And this is why we had a higher base MSRP, because there are different kinds of vehicles that serve different purposes. We didn't want to rule out some of the light duty trucks that are coming on board for tradespeople, for example. So we wanted to keep things as flexible as possible and get into the details of that as we design the program, if it in fact is authorized.
All right, thank you.
Thank you,
Sure.
Patrick. Representative Dodge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are you able to stack this with any other incentives at all? Or is it, you know, like if I have a personal business, but it's, you know, pretty mom and pop, and I've used my personal, you know, car, and I've used the EV incentive for my personal purchase of my vehicle, and then I want to use the replace your fleet for another vehicle that I use for business. Can I do that?
So you're saying that you've used your personal vehicle for both work and personal needs, and then you wanted to add another vehicle. Is that?
I'm just curious. So if I've used one of the new PEVs incentives that we currently have, that program that we currently have,
I see.
and then I also
Sure.
happen to be a small business person that has another vehicle that I use for business purposes, could I also?
Sure. So that is clear. We've had some people ask questions about that, and where it's for a commercial purpose, it's not currently allowed for the new PV program. But in terms of what this can be stacked with, there's the federal tax credits, which provide for the first time clean commercial vehicle tax credits, not just to for-profit businesses, but also tax exempt organizations. And that provides up to a $7,500 tax credit for light duty vehicles. And then for medium to heavy duty vehicles, you can get up to a $40,000 tax credit. So this proposal, Electrify Your Fleet, is really dealing with just a passenger, more light duty fleet. So potentially you could get up to $10,000 when you stack this incentive with the federal tax credits. And then there are some utilities, I think, that in the state of Vermont that offer rebates for commercial entities.
Anthea?
I was just going to add, while there isn't a definition of fleet in the language that's proposed to be codified, leaving it to the agency to develop that through their program guidelines, one of the tools of statutory interpretation when a word isn't defined is to look to the plain English dictionary definition of fleet. While you're talking, I Googled fleet, and one of the definitions is a number of vehicles or aircraft operating together or under the same ownership. I think there's sort of, you have a spectrum, one vehicle, not a fleet, 15 vehicles, fleet, 2 vehicles, the sole proprietor who has, the truck that he uses for painting and the truck that he uses for drywalling, and he switches between the two maybe. I wouldn't want to have to make a determination as to whether or not that's a fleet. And it could be that maybe you don't define fleet, but you say that fleet is at least this many vehicles. If you wanted to sort of shift the program in the direction of maybe not the person who just happens to have 2 vehicles that are used for business. It does say in who is eligible for the incentives is municipalities and business entities registered in Vermont. You are going to get business entities that are registered that probably have teeny fleets.
Yeah.
And then it's a question of whether or not that's who you're actually intending to target the program towards.
And for that matter, for smaller municipalities, they may only have one truck.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they probably don't have a municipal vehicle that you can take to go to a conference or something either. So, I guess my concern would be limiting it, like we would, some municipalities wouldn't qualify for this.
So you could say,
If they only had one.
you could say provide incentives to Vermont municipalities and like make it to provide incentives to 1, Vermont municipalities, and 2, business entities in Vermont, registered in Vermont, that maintain a fleet of at least X motor vehicles that are registered in Vermont. So all municipalities would be eligible, but only the registered business entities that currently have a fleet of at least.
Yeah.
Or
And then-
have a fleet or intend to have a fleet if we wanted to allow expansion of a fleet.
And as somebody mentioned, that there's not a lot of large fleet businesses in this state. There may be some that have, 3 or 5. I'm sure it's rare that there's a business that has 15 or 20. I mean, I can think of maybe a couple.
So I just want to make sure I remove it. Yeah, I think that's it's a good conversation, a good point. And Representative Cochran?
I mean, I guess I'll just say is the amount of money that's in this program is very limited. I originally thought that this was just for municipalities. I didn't realize we're opening up for businesses. So, I mean, I guess it goes to 2 points. I would probably definitely not want to codify this, but to put this in session law and have it exclusively for municipalities, see how it goes. We can come back, do an analysis on it, and then if we want to expand it. But what is there? 300, what was it?
Is it 300,000?
It's 500,000.
500,000 is is pretty nominal amount. So, I mean, I think we should be narrow, just my opinion, as opposed to opening it up for everybody with 500,000.
Representative Dutch?
Well, I'm going back to what Representative Shaw said before about changing culture. And I think that this is a great inroads that we could make for the small business people that have a truck or that are thinking of replacing it. And as gas prices go up, they're considering electric and, and I think it would be, and I actually think maybe it should be the possibility of a plug-in hybrid, gas and plug-in. I think that would actually be a good incentive for light duty, people that have to use a bigger vehicle that won't be able to only to go full battery. And at $2,500 reduction, it's not a big reduction in price for a light duty vehicle. And so.
Okay. I saw a couple other hands. Representative Shaw?
So I don't necessarily disagree with Representative Cochran, but I'm wondering if municipalities are a large enough audience to take in 200 incentives in maybe like a year, if they want to see what the program's going to do. So just throwing that out there, I don't have many.
What do you mean that they wouldn't? What are you trying to say?
Well, what I'm trying to say is will the municipalities be able to transfer to BEVs quick enough to show us what the program can or can't do?
Yeah, I'm fine then. Let's just go with small businesses. I'm saying pick one or the other. I mean, I think it's just like too broad. It's just you're diluting it. I mean, in a sense, I don't know. Just go with small businesses or whatever.
I mean, I don't mind.
I could care less. I'm just saying pick one.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I don't know.
We have a couple.
Or put more money in
Well,
it.
I don't have a proposal. I just point of discussion. Because if the purpose is to get as many vehicles on the road as we can all at once.
Okay, a couple other points. I'm going to try to move us. Be succinct, please. Yeah, we have 10 minutes. Representative Pouch and Representative
Yeah,
Lally.
thank you. I mean, I like the municipality piece, but it takes a long time for a town to buy a vehicle.
Yeah.
So I think we should leave it in there, but I think, stay with for businesses, and we just need to define how big a fleet is, I think. We'll see after 1 year. I think same thing, people, if you have a fleet of a number of vehicles, you'll probably be changing them out regularly.
Representative Lally.
Yes, I just wanted to echo what I've heard a couple of folks say, which is that, you know, if our goal is to measure how successful this is and what the reach is, I think that municipalities are not the way to go, because they do, as a sitting select board member and having had a discussion about the question of electrifying several pieces of equipment, you know, decisions get made very, very slowly, even when you have ARPA funds on tap. So, you know, the lived experience part of this. So I think you'll get the quickest feedback on the effectiveness if you do open it, as Representative Dodge was suggesting, to maybe small businesses. I was also concerned about it if it wasn't one of our goals to encourage, like the ski resorts, to adopt fleets of electric snowmobiles, and then that would get those down into the pipeline for the, you know, recreational users. So I was getting confused that maybe that was something we were not in support of anymore.
So we're going to,
Emphasizing.
I was just gonna say, I don't think there is anything in this language that currently prohibits a ski resort from having a fleet of snowmobiles.
Great, thanks.
do you have something, a new comment?
I'd like, I was hoping to just hear back people's thoughts about changing the language of BEVs on line 11 to PEVs.
I'd also like to give Patrick an opportunity just to speak about since we've been asking the agency about the rationale for not including PEVs here, just to hear your thoughts on that before we ask this question. Go ahead, Patrick, if you want to join in.
Sure, thanks. So the whole idea behind all of this is really to get out as many vehicles as possible and make as much climate progress as possible, as quickly as possible. We understand that there needs to be more time and outreach for the Replace Your Ride program to work, but we thought that by taking away $500,000, a relatively smaller pot of funding from this, that we could look at how we might achieve two things. One, more rapid progress in EV adoption, and particularly battery electric vehicle adoption, because that gets us the highest climate gains. But then secondly, what is the potential for using this to then help continue to build a used vehicle market in the state of Vermont a few years down the road, versus the new PEV program going to individual households that might hold on to a vehicle for 10, 15 years before trading in. So those were the two main goals, is just to not leave money sitting here, not achieving anything, and to be able to make some rapid progress. And so to the point about battery electric vehicles, to make very more rapid progress than just the transitional technology of plug-in hybrids. The other sort of broader context of this is that last year, the legislature appropriated $10 million for a variety of things. Workplace charging was one of those, community attractions. So there are possibilities here for municipalities, for businesses, nonprofits to be able to take advantage of multiple programs. You've got a new tax credit program at the federal level for commercial clean vehicles that can be stacked then potentially with this incentive that can also be a part of a fuller discussion. We have money in a grant agreement, Drive Electric Vermont, to help support different organizations plan for electrification with their fleets, and then to have the infrastructure support so that it's not just we're handing off a small incentive for a vehicle, that it's part of a wider initiative within state government. So the hope is with that smaller pot of funding to be able to learn from that and understand what we have achieved this time next year, and then hopefully be able to make better recommendations about how to spend the remaining funds. So to the earlier discussion about whether this ought to be codified in statute or remain in session law, I think the agency is entirely open to having this piece of it remain in session law, because it is sort of a more experimental program at this point.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. I want to kind of ask a few questions. So Representative Dodge asked, do you want to say anything more about PEVs?
Yeah, no, I guess it's just similar to the sort of replace your ride philosophy of, you know, if you've got a really gas guzzler and you've been wanting to try to replace it, but if you're, you know, and it happens to be your business vehicle, which is where a lot of our bigger, you know, like light duty trucks might be, that it, you know, for folks who do have to drive quite a bit and might have a little bit of that range anxiety to go full electric, if you get something that is, you know, giving you, instead of, you know, however many miles per gallon, but now suddenly gives you 30 miles per gallon or whatever, that we might have more success. But I get that we're really trying to get full electric adoption, and I think municipalities might be more likely to adopt that than the small businesses.
So what do other people want to comment on that before we move to the next thing? I'd like to get to some decision points on this. So do people want to open it up? Can I get a sense? Are people interested in opening it up from limiting it from battery electric to PEVs? I'm not able to tell what people are thinking. I see one person. Okay.
Thank you. So I'll just comment on that and the overall, you know, listening to Patrick, this is a, you know, first year. So I think we think, all right, municipalities aren't going to be able to use up the money. They might buy a couple and try it. I don't think we're going to be selling a lot of snow machines for skis because they're in the middle of the winter, you know, and so they probably don't have much range. I think all of these people are going to be trying some of these, and I think we'll get that feedback. So I think opening it up to see what, you know, has some traction and what doesn't will be helpful. And as far as PUVs versus just battery electric, you know, I'm okay with it. There's not a lot of vehicles out there for that. There are a few, but there's not a lot of electrical vehicles for vans or trucks out there now too. So we're right at the start of the market. And I think putting it out there and see what sticks, you know, I think makes sense.
Okay, so I'm going to separate the questions if we can. First, it's like, I want to get the sense of the committee to Representative Dodge's suggestion that we open up to PEVs. Can I get a sense, like, if people are, yes,
show of hands.
yeah, show of hands, like, it's like, because you're not, nobody's nodding. So people who are open to that, raise your hand, or do you want to
I
comment?
guess my comment would be, if you're talking of fleet or in a territory that people like electricians, HVAC, guys that have 3-4 vehicles, they're not going to take off on a call that they have no idea when they'll be able to plug in again,
Right.
where they're at, et cetera. They're not going to ready to go.
Yeah.
And part of what we heard in the state police testimony the other day, you can't go on an open-ended thing where you don't know where you're going to be and you don't know when you're coming back and you don't know what you're going to face. They're not going to leave without the option of gas, some kind of optional plug-in. If you want people in a rural setting they're not ready to do that.
Right.
That in a fleet version.
I think that's Representative Dodge's.
So I appreciate the suggestion.
So folks who want to open it up to PEVs,
But if you want to get UPS to convert 2,000 vehicles and get closer to your goal, we
So you-
put money that way.
okay, so I just need to see hands. So I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're at 6, and
Next year.
we could change it next year. And then so opposed to that idea? 3. Okay, so we can change, right, that's a,
Damn, I got beat again.
you got beaten there, so, okay, let's put in, let's,
It'll be highlighted in the next draft, so you will have a reminder,
great.
you have this conversation.
I do have one thought on that. If we're gonna open it up to plug-in electric vehicles, we should have the same constraints on them.
Yeah.
Which, as
Yes,
earlier. Yeah, whatever mileage that was specified earlier in the bill.
So do you want to say, because that was like phasing out
Yeah.
that less than 20. Do you want to say now that it's less than 20? And if you do, I think you need to know a little bit more about what's available.
Okay. So to,
I mean, so
Yeah.
you could include the phasing out language, but being as how you are not, it sounds like thinking that maybe this is going to be a forever program. It's going to be a 1 year and get a report back on. If you put the phase out language, it might not mean anything because.
I was just thinking that we should put a target mileage on a plug-in electric vehicle. If we're using an plug-in electric vehicle, they get 10 extra miles in range. It doesn't accomplish anything. But if we get 30 extra miles, that accomplishes something.
So it was 20, or it is 20 for the incentive program for new PEVs. I can use that language, but I'm just highlighting the fact that if you're going to have the phasing out, if you're going to track the phasing out approach, it might not mean anything for the first year of the program. And if you're going to use, it needs to get at least 20 miles to a charge. You don't know what is available on the market, and it could have the effect of just making it battery electric vehicles. So those are the only two comments I have, but I'm happy to do it. I just need to know which direction to go in.
I would prefer you just put a number down and say, and then we'll find out.
Okay,
okay,
so with a range of at least 20 miles?
it's consistent with that.
Okay.
Okay, great. And so I think the other, I'm trying to just get us so we can, our people, what we heard is that from the agency that adding, like, while the idea of mowers and ATVs might be a great idea, the administration of that is pretty tough because there's no odometer reading.
Fine, this is a brand new program.
Okay, so that's, okay.
Next year,
We can read
it
it
takes off.
if it takes off and, or
And add lawnmowers.
Yeah. And I think that I heard that we want to keep businesses in, we'll keep municipalities in too. We don't want to exclude them because they, you know, even though we admit that.
And just one comment, so if we just say fleet,
Yeah, that's the big question.
so the agency of transportation can figure that out if it's one or more, or two or more,
I think
or more.
I think under the English dictionary definition, it would be hard to say fleet was, I guess,
One or more,
One car, yeah.
was,
was one car, because that's not a number of,
so two or more.
I think you are leaving it to the agency to determine
We have incentives.
And I think
if
they
it's
have-
two or more, and they could, under the language, come in and say it needs to be a fleet of at least 5 vehicles or something
Okay.
like that. You're sort of leaving it to them to figure that
Okay,
piece out.
I'm good with that.
Are people okay with that? Okay. And so it sounds also that from the sense of the committee, this is a new program and even the agency is saying, maybe it's okay if we don't codify this. So does that get us through, everybody okay with, it sounds like everyone okay with snowmobiles, all of that, motorcycles, everything. I'm not.
The only thing is take out that drive electric thing.
So I think our marching orders are move to session law. Since you're moving into session law, do you want to add consulting entities or no?
Say that again, please.
Since you're moving it to session law, do you want to add consulting entities? It would just be,
That would be consistent with what we've done in the past, right? I think it'd be nice if we were consistent.
Have one, so if we have, is it a may? Because if we're going to do that, isn't there an administration fee of 15%?
So that's in here
so
too.
that's later. So in the originating, when you created the other programs, you required the agency, you used shall, the agency shall consult with these other entities within state government. And my question was just, do you want to track that here? I know you didn't want to codify the shall consult with for programs that had already been created, but you're dealing with a different, entity here.
Yeah.
And then if you do want to add consulting entities, I need to know who they are. And you can get to the administrative costs at the end.
previously when these other programs, did we identify who those entities were?
Yeah, I think it was the Department of Public Safety, Public Service and Environmental Conservation. Maybe you would want to say that they need to consult with VLCT or Chambers of Commerce, or regional planning commissions. You could require consultation with Drive Electric. They're probably going to be in the mix anyway, given the marketing.
I mean, this is not shall, this is.
If you're gonna, they always can consult with other entities, they can choose to do that. The prior language was they were required to consult with certain entities. So the question is, do you want to require them to consult with other entities, or do you want to kind of trust that the agency is going to consult with the appropriate entities as they create a program, which they now have done 3 times prior to this?
Yeah, we've done it.
So just to be clear, we're on page 21, number 2.
No, number 1. I would put it there. There's which shall be administered by the Agency of Transportation, and I would put at the end, comma, in consultation with, if you were gonna require.
Okay, so the second one is for marketing.
No, the second one is for, like, if they were gonna use CES for it, to administer the program, the way they administer the other programs.
Right.
If they were gonna have a contractor
Okay,
to
so that's
administer.
in May.
That's in 2, and that is May. The agency could, if it chose, administer the program itself, which would be a deviation from how they've done.
Okay, I'm thinking I like your last statement, that we've done this so many times now that I think the language would be redundant and really unnecessary.
Okay, so then I would keep subdivision A1 just as it is.
Yes.
Yep. Let's go.
Let's go.
Decisions.
Yes, I'm okay with it. Let's do it.
And I assume you want to keep the may retain contractors?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So does
I think you already talked about B and you made changes there. The PEVs, but the plug-in hybrids need to have a range of at least 20 miles per charge. Do you like all the base MSRP language? And since you're putting this in session law, do you just want to not have this benchmarking language? Just say PHEV or BEVs with a base MSRP of $60,000 or less.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
So I'll remove the benchmark language.
All right.
Okay. Administrative costs, do you want to let them have up to 15% of the 500,000?
Yeah, that's consistent with what we've done.
Yep, okay. Outreach and marketing, require and say that it's part of administrative costs and take out the Drive Electric piece.
Yes, that's consistent with what we've.
Okay, so what I will do is I will move this to session law and I'll make those changes. So it'll say, section, under this, it would be section 9A. I'll renumber it.
Okay.
And then the linkage will be to the annual reporting, which will now become 2905 on page 23, line 16. And that might be a good thing to start talking about.
Good, down to line 17 on page 24.
I would say you're good to line 15 on page 23. You haven't talked about annual reporting yet.
Representative Burke?
Yeah, I would just like to go back, and I know we had that conversation about taking out Electric Vermont, but remind me why we're taking it out?
So the reason why you wanted to take it out of codified law was you didn't want to put in the green books that the state needs to be consulting with Drive Electric Vermont on programs that you're codifying, because maybe Drive Electric Vermont isn't going to exist anymore. Maybe they're not going to have this contract with Drive Electric Vermont. I think, knowing that the expectation with this program is that maybe it's not going to be permanent, or maybe it's going to be a trial run, and what you codify might have changes if you eventually codify something. It's different to say that they need to consult with Drive Electric on marketing, because you know that they have a current contract that you have funded for multiple years. But it would be consistent with the approach you're taking other places to remove Drive Electric Vermont here as the mandatory consulting with entity for purposes of marketing and outreach. If they have contracted with Drive Electric Vermont, which they have, this requires them to consult with Drive Electric Vermont.
So really,
Even if they're- even if it's-
drive electric Vermont in here for the fleet.
I'm saying even if I was directed to take them out for the fleet, but because the language says in consultation with any retained contractors, and you know that Drive Electric is a retained contractor right now, and this program might only last for a little bit, I think you can say with confidence that they're going to consult with Drive Electric, even though it doesn't
Without having
specifically
to
say
specify.
Drive Electric, yes, because they are a retained contractor.
You okay? with that? Okay. So I think we got to a good place. We'll be back with you after the floor.
Yeah, and this is actually really helpful that I know now that you're moving into session law, because I'm gonna go do that while you're on the floor.
Okay, great. Great. So we're gonna,
Well,
got
that should be
the-
easy just to yank out, right? Annual reporting, the session law.
Oh, well, I'm just gonna move it to 2905. I think you want to keep it codified so you have actual reports
Okay.
for the other programs.
so great. So we're gonna wrap up and be back in here after the floor. Come right back to the floor, from after the floor, please.
All the emails from Kelly.
I did.
So, we're anticipating that we might go longer today. We're gonna break at noon time for lunch so that people can eat since we started early. So we'll just come right up after the floor. And if we go long on the floor, I'll either make an announcement or look to me or Butch and we'll